Hey Handler Helpers! Monster Handler Tyson, Monster Handler Jen here for a very, very exciting new segment where we are going to be talking to My Singing Monsters content creators, get a kind of a feel about where they get their inspiration from, why they like making MSM content, all that fun stuff. So for our very first episode, we have PopCross Studios here.
Very excited.
Hello!
Hello, everybody. This is super fun, super exciting. I'm so glad you all reached out.
I personally am a huge fan.
I'm the fanboy.
Thank you very much, Tyson.
We've been planning this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I get to talk to them because ever since your first MSM video, I've been like watched all your stuff. Like, it's really interesting.
Oh, sweet. That's awesome.
Which leads us to some questions because we're curious on how you got into drawing and how you've established your art style.
So originally when I started my channel, PopCross Studios, I was working for another YouTube channel called The Score Esports, and I was working for them as an animator, but on the side started building my channel because I wanted to shift more into just illustrated work, not as much animated stuff. I kind of really like when I can sit down with a drawing and render out the whole thing, and so after about a year of building up my channel on the side, I was earning enough off it to justify making it my full-time job, so I left and have been doing PopCross Studios full-time for about 3.5 years now. And over that time, my style has slowly evolved and my content has evolved too, to a point where now the majority of the kinds of videos I make are essentially taking pop culture crossover, how I got into the My Singing Monsters stuff, taking cuter kinds of characters and rendering them out into more fleshed out, monstery, sometimes scary versions of themselves.
So how did you like come up with that idea?
It's a lot of the stuff that I do regularly on the channel now is stuff that just slowly evolved over time. I think the first video that I did of changing thing into other thing was taking Pokemon and turning them into superheroes. And I think I might have actually seen someone else doing that, but I did actually reboot that series recently, and the art and story is much better. Originally, I wasn't also doing storytelling. I always have had a passion for storytelling, and I actually wrote and self-published a book series before starting my YouTube channel. A bunch of the series on my channel are narrated by my own original characters. So it was kind of a way to work in my original characters to the episodes, so I can work in like using the lore from whatever I'm adapting while working in little character traits of my own original characters, and it's just been such a really fun way to blend in so many elements of things that I liked that might not have originally been planned to be part of the channel, that just like it all slowly came into place.
I love when like things kind of just like evolve into like something different. It's so good.
He's sounding a little bit like a Warden-y spirit.
Yes.
And a monster handler, but in his own sort of monster world.
He does.
Which is pretty cool.
He does, yes. And if you don't know the lore of Dr. Warden-y spirit, then you gotta look into that yourself.
I'll probably have to work that in.
I think you mentioned that you never heard of the game until recently, so what caught your attention?
Right, so for most of the topics I have the most fun working with are things that my subscribers suggest. So My Singing Monsters, I clearly had a bunch of people in my community that are also part of the My Singing Monsters community, because I started getting lots of people saying, hey, you should check out My Singing Monsters, My Singing Monsters, and I was like, okay, cool. I mean, I'm getting a bunch of people suggesting this, so I'll look into it. And right when I saw some of the designs, I was like, this falls right into my ballpark of really cool designs, but also ones that lean a little bit more into the cuter, more friendly looking side. So it fits perfectly into any one of my series where I take things and make them more monstrous and freaky. And then me ignorantly assuming that because it's a mobile game, I was just like, okay, the lore for this probably isn't going to be that in depth. And then I start looking into it. Like, the first video was like an hour long almost, and I was like, do I have the right thing? And I started listening to it, and I was like, there is so much to play with in here for writing lore and using with the creatures. It was a gold mine.
Imagine when I got hired, I didn't realize how big it was as well.
Right.
So I remember asking people, like, what should I expect? You should expect a lot of lore to memorize it all.
We're still learning all the time.
Yeah, fair enough.
We're always discovering new things in the monster world.
That's true.
Yeah, and it's fun because there's so many details that have come before when we like started here, where it's like it's fun. Even though we're working here, there's times where like we're learning stuff about the lore too. We're like, oh my gosh, that's so cool.
How many times have you been sitting with Monster Handler Matt and he's dropping all these facts and you're like, I literally didn't know that and I've been here for 2 years.
No, people think I'm like faking my reactions to stuff. It's like, no, I'm genuinely like blown away. I'm like, oh my gosh, I did not know how that worked.
So when you're choosing what monsters that you want to draw, what inspires you to pick certain monsters over other? Like what kind of aspects are you looking for?
So there's a bunch of different things that I consider. First off, in the comment sections of my videos, especially if I mention that I'm thinking about working with a topic, I'll just have a bunch of different suggestions of people of like, oh, you should work with this monster, this monster. So then I'll start going through and looking up those specific suggestions, and then I'll also just, once I've seen what my subscribers are suggesting, then I'll go, okay, what of these do I like the most and what do I think I can adapt the most? And then some of them I'm like, okay, this has a monster sitting inside the rib cage of another monster and I don't know how I'm gonna I don't know how I'm gonna write that one to justify it.
That's a bit too fantastical.
Yeah, I still kind of want to give some of those a crack. I forget the name of the one where I believe it's a Wublin, where one of them is literally inside the rib cage of another.
Bon Appetit.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, so that was one I've considered working with a few times, but each time I've chickened out and been like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this one.
Next question, because I'm so interested in how like your process is on creating these. So how do you decide what details to focus on? For example, when you drew Talker, which was like the wordo, you went more for like a ram feel because like, you know, I feel like you like noticed like the ram horns and you kind of like ran with that. So yeah, like what's your process on like the direction on a monster?
Once I decide which ones I'm planning to use, I'll take something like the Wordos and I'll the one that comes to my mind most is the Brump because that was that's my favorite design to work with. In any case, I'll take the creature and say, okay, what animals in real life does this resemble? Yeah, in that case, the Talker, I looked at it, was like, okay, ram horns, and I'll render out the fur a little bit more, and then I also looked at how goats and rams will usually have those like flat pupils that are particularly
like rectangle,
that can be particularly creepy looking, and because I was trying to make them a bit more monstrous, I was like, okay, cool, that's a fun little element I can work in. And so it's trying to find a balance of making sure there's enough of the original design in there while also pulling and just fleshing out elements more with inspiration from real life animals that are similar. So the Brump being my favorite example, I was taking most inspiration from frogs, amphibians, and T-Rexes, because it has that sort of T-Rex body shape kind of, and that's some of my favorite stuff to work with is T-Rexes. I love any kind of Tyrannosaurus type shaped creature, partially because
I did notice that from you.
My kind of guy.
I do see that you go for a T-Rex a lot.
Yeah,
T-Rex
I love
feel.
doing that.
And it's cool because like that process is somewhat similar to what our artists do as well. Like they are also looking at like references when they're thinking of like new designs of monsters, references of like animals and stuff.
Right.
And it's funny how like you go for like more detailed route where they like, okay, how can I kind of simplify this?
Right.
But it also sounds like you're taking a lot of inspiration from real world animals, real world sources. So that's where you're drawing a lot of inspiration for your creations. Is there anywhere else you're drawing inspiration from?
For this one, it is generally animals. Sometimes other people's fantasy creatures as well, not just taking animals and inventing everything myself. Like there's so many cool different fantasy designs out there, especially lots of times I'll look up designs from Dungeons and Dragons for doing fantasy monsters, especially things like
I love that.
a lot of the time if I want to do a more monstery version of something, I'll look up the dire version of that thing, like a dire wolf, a dire bear, which in D&D is generally just like a bigger, scarier version of the thing.
It's just a bigger thing. Yeah. I remember you did that for you went for like a dire wolf, like werewolf feel for that. So yeah, I think that makes sense. Like some monsters it fits like having a more like real animal inspiration, and then some, yeah, like when it's a little more out there, you go for a fantasy type beast, which makes sense. Let's get into the juicy lore questions.
Yes, because we love your lore.
Thank you.
Well, like, again, like we were talking about earlier, like people don't realize how much lore the game has, and so like we find it so fun, like, you know, coming up with lore and like learning more stuff about the lore too. So, but there's a difference between our lore and your lore.
Yes.
And that is, yours is a little more darker than ours.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because you're actually, you know, making monstrous monsters. So but with that, like, what's your favorite lore that you've created, and like for what monster of ours?
It's not even like for one specific monster that I really like. In terms of drawing, I really love drawing freaky, monstrous kinds of versions of things, but in terms of writing, I also really like trying to work uplifting, positive, inspiring messages into the stories I'm telling. So in the case of this series, it's actually one of my favorite series that I've written lore for, because I got to kind of have my cake and eat it too, where I could have the monstrous designs, and I wrote it into the backstory in my altered version of the My Singing Monsters lore that these creatures have existed for thousands of years. And eventually people started hunting them down, and because they were easier to track down when they were making their music, they adapted to stop making their music, but that took them out of alignment with their nature, and so they became more hostile from that and from being hunted down, so they started fighting back against humans, and anytime a human came near them, they would lash out and try to kill them. And then so the fun part of it was being able to write the story where my own original character is going around and trying to encourage these creatures to get back into making their music and encourage people to not hunt them down and show that they can all live in harmony again if they just allow the creatures to make their songs and not hunt them down. And so it was a really nice blend of, I have the justification in the lore for drawing them in their more monstery, freaky kind of state, but also the story takes them back into a more positive state. And so that itself, as the overarching narrative of the lore that I wrote, was my favorite part of it.
It's so good.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite part, is that like you're kind of giving a little bit of like a story on like life in general, but then always bringing it back to, like you said, like that uplifting, positive, like we can all live together, we can all make music together, like it's okay. Like that's my favorite part, is those turning points in your story and in your lore. And I'm like, yes, they did it. They're playing their instruments.
and I love it too, because like it's also the kind of the same message that we have with the normal My Singing Monsters. Is like, yeah, again, like everyone can get along, and even if everyone's like different and maybe not so great at making music, when you put something together, like it makes something like phenomenal and great. Right. So I think it's so creative and cool that like you've put a darker spin on it, but you've kept like still the heart of My Singing Monsters alive, which is like so cool.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Well, I mean, it helps that I had such an incredible source in the lore that you guys have, and the designs. Like an episode can only really work if there's some cool stuff for me to pull from in the first place, and there was a plethora of cool stuff to pull from in My Singing Monsters.
So the narrator of the My Singing Monsters series, I believe, is Taran Janavar.
I just pronounce it Janavar. It's pulled from the
all right, I like Janavar. That's good. Here's me trying to be all creative, but no. Can you tell us a little bit about that persona and like who the narrator is? Because like we're big fans.
Yeah, for sure.
We're big fans of them.
So that is actually Taran Janavar is, to me, one of the most special characters on my channel. I have a bunch of different narrators, but he was the first character that kind of evolved naturally on the channel as a narrator. He starts becoming more like he is now, open-minded and going. Even sometimes I'll have him think back to a creature from a previous episode and be like, I thought that was impossible, but knowing what I know now, I think maybe there. So then really over time, he's just learned to be more open-minded and seen that there is plenty of magic in his world. And getting more magical as time goes on, which is partially due to the fact that I just want to work more fantastical elements into the stories that he narrates, but I'm trying to have it be a slow progression.
Great life lesson too.
Yeah, exactly. Even in episodes where I have a little bit more of a dour, horror-based tone, I always end my videos with some kind of positive, inspirational, uplifting kind of message. Because a lot of the time while I'm working, I'm listening to motivational speeches or podcasts by high-achieving people, and yeah, so my favorite kinds of stories, though, are ones where I can work some kind of positive, inspiring message into the story through the characters that I have.
I feel like we're talking to a real world philosopher right
this is
now. I
awesome.
feel like I've learned so much just from talking to you.
Thank you.
Also, like back on your character as well. Like, I love that they're having like an arc
Oh,
and like an active arc. Like it's one thing to like make them just like a narrator and like this like the basic premise of the character. They narrate, but it's like no, like they're always evolving and like growing as a person, which is just so cool, and like also entices viewers to like keep coming back and be like, oh, I wonder what kind of lesson they're gonna learn today.
Yeah,
and
thank
stuff
you.
Like that.
Yeah.
Like it's really cool.
What lesson am I gonna learn today?
Yeah, exactly. So what aspects of our lore do you find like the most interesting?
I mean, the depth of it largely, but I really like going back to the Celestials and the Colossus.
Yes.
Colossi? Whatever plural of Colossus is.
The Colossals.
The Colossals.
Yes.
The
The
Colossuses.
Right, Colossals. But yeah, getting to play around with the origins of it and how I could kind of blend that and try and fit it into my own universe, and just all the different realms and how they have different types of monsters. I mean, the Wublins are something that I only started dipping into a little bit in later episodes. So it was particularly fun for me.
We like that stuff,
yeah,
too.
working with the Wuboxes and their. So this is the part where I'm like, wait, am I misremembering? Is this officially canon that the Wuboxes created the Wublins? Or is that just
Yep.
fan?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
I wasn't sure if that was just fan speculation because I look at so many
No,
different
they did. No,
sources. Okay.
They did that.
Cool. So yeah, getting to adapt that was particularly fun, and working it in that the Wuboxes had been created by a dark sorcerer in my universe. But yeah, the Wublins and Wuboxes was a very interesting element that lots of my subscribers after the first episode were very adamant that I had to do something with that.
Everyone loves the Wuboxes and
Yeah, no kidding. What would you say like your favorite My Singing Monsters monstrosity creation has been? Like, both from the art side, but also the lore side.
I think I gotta go with the Brump. I mean, maybe I'm more so leaning in with the design just because I absolutely loved. I mean, the Brump is probably my favorite design from My Singing Monsters, and because of that, I made sure to put extra effort into the drawing I did of it, the more monsterized, freakier version of it, and
And it was fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that one's got to take my favorite slot.
Now we do have like an activity and challenge for you,
Okay.
but I have one more question that I
Yeah.
want to confirm. So you made a monstrous maw,
Oh yeah.
which is you did like a mix of the common and epic maw,
Right.
and you mentioned that someone was killed by that maw. Now, did you get that idea because? Monster Handler Matt, it is a notoriously known thing in our community that he was attacked by a epic maw in his journey in the My Singing Monsters world. Now, did you get that from that, or was that just some random detail that you put
I
in?
would absolutely love to tell you that I got that from that source, but it's unfortunately just a coincidence. I did watch.
Well, Monster Handler Matt will be very happy to hear that he's
Yes.
still alive in
Yes.
this world.
He can still be canonically alive.
Because yes, when we saw that episode, I wasn't excited, but I was like, I think he just killed off Monster Handler Matt, and then and everyone was laughing at it. I just wanted to confirm if that was the case or not.
No, I can make it canon right here and now that Matt's still alive.
So if you're interested, we wanted to challenge you to draw a monster of our choosing
Oh, boy.
at your leisure,
Okay.
of course.
At your
Not
leisure.
right
Okay.
now. This is not like a right here, right now.
All right.
So a little behind the scenes here, Monster Handler Tyson and I, along with another coworker, Monster Handler Charlie, we all voiced one monster. It's like a trio of voices in harmony called the Gnarls.
Gnarls.
Yes.
I think my subscribers
so
have
we wanted
suggested
to challenge you to make a monstrosity out of Gnarls if you were up for it.
Oh, this
And it's a very new
Yeah,
monster.
it's new.
this thing is beautifully horrific. I've just pulled it up to make sure I
Yeah.
can.
Well, that's why.
That's
we
why we thought
we
it'd be
thought it'd
good.
be a perfect fit for you.
This is definitely, it will be a challenge lore-wise writing this thing in, because it definitely looks very fantastical, but I am totally down because there are so many elements in this that I love playing with.
That would be
Beautiful.
awesome. Oh, we're glad that you like that idea. Thank you so much, PopCross, aka Christian, for taking the time to talk with the monster handlers today for our very first handler
Yes.
hangout. It was so awesome getting to know you and a little bit more about the work you do, and we can't wait to see what more monstrosities you come up with.
Thank you so much, Jen and Tyson. This has been super fun. I'm very glad you reached out, and I'm very honored to be the first one.
Thank you so much.
Do we want to sign off with a classic happy monstering?
Yeah.
All right.
Happy monstering!
If you want to see Nyarls turn into a beastly monster, be sure to check out PopCross Studios' latest video on their YouTube channel. You can find the link in our description. I guess we gotta go check it out. See you later!